At first light, the savannah looks harmless, a gold ocean whispering under a cool breeze. Rangers Evan and Mila were deep on patrol, days from help, when they found a sight that instantly turned their blood cold. A full-grown leopard, upright and motionless, pinned by a cruel V of acacia wood, his powerful body withered and still. And the stench of infection told the Rangers he had been struggling for days. With the nearest station a grueling 2-day drive away and a radio signal non-existent, a rescue here was a high-stakes, all-or-nothing operation. Everything, their training, their nerve, and the leopard's life, came down to the next few dangerous hours. This is the story of a life-or-death decision made far from civilization, where the only chance a magnificent creature had lay in a handsaw and a ranger's skill. In the early morning, as the sun had just risen, the African grassland stretched endlessly, a vast, shimmering sea glowing with its characteristic golden color. It was a world of deceptive tranquility. 2 rangers, a man and a woman, began a long patrol deep into the reserve, their specialized vehicle kicking up a trail of fine red dust. Their trip had already lasted for many days, and with each passing kilometer, each step farther from the familiar comforts of the Central Ranger Station grew more difficult. On their shoulders sat the immense responsibility of protecting this corner of nature, of caring for and, when necessary, rescuing the creatures of this vast and unforgiving wilderness. The male ranger, Evan, was a man in his late 50s, his face a road map of his 30 years in the bush. His movements were slow and deliberate, his silence born not of aloofness, but of a deep, listening connection to the world around him. He carried the heavy tools of their trade, a handsaw, a comprehensive set of emergency medical equipment, and an anesthetic rifle as a necessary precaution. The female ranger, Mila, was nearly 20 years his junior, but what she lacked in years, she made up for in skill and a fierce, burning dedication. Her hands were as comfortable performing field surgery as they were steering the heavy truck through treacherous terrain. She had prepared the antiseptic swabs and carried a worn, leather-bound notebook, ready to record every detail of a potential rescue. The early morning meadow was peaceful, the air cool and clean before the oppressive heat of the day took hold. But both Evan and Mila knew that this profound peace always concealed the potential for unexpected danger. The sweet, melodic bird song drifted on the gentle breeze, mixing with the low screech of the truck's tires on the dusty red road. As they drove, they discussed the day's route, their voices a low, familiar murmur as they predicted which herds might be moving out from the riverbeds to forage on the open plains. Although they were tired after many long days on patrol, their eyes still shone with an unwavering faith and a deep sense of responsibility for the wild nature entrusted to their care. As they pushed deeper into the grassland, far from the well-traveled tourist tracks, they suddenly noticed a strange and unsettling sight near a small, gnarled acacia tree. A mature male leopard stood motionless against the trunk, his beautiful rosette-covered body strangely rigid and seemingly unmoved by the approaching vehicle. Evan immediately slowed the truck, his relaxed posture instantly replaced by a focused alertness. He and Mila stopped the car and looked more closely through their binoculars. There were no signs of other leopards nearby, which was normal for a solitary male, but his stillness was deeply unnatural. Mila frowned, a line of concern creasing her brow. The stillness of a predator like this was profoundly abnormal, and it was almost always a sign of extreme danger or distress. They approached slowly in the truck, their hearts pounding with a mixture of caution and professional curiosity. As they got closer, they discovered the shocking cause of the leopard's stillness. His neck was wedged impossibly in a V-shaped branch that jutted out from the tree's main trunk like a natural pincer. His body was shockingly emaciated, his powerful muscles withered away, leaving his skin hanging loosely over his frame. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was so weak and shallow it was almost imperceptible, as if he had been unconscious for many hours, if not days. A foul, cloying stench rose from the animal, the smell of infection and decay, mixed with a thick yellow fluid that was oozing from the deep wounds on its neck and face. Softly, as if not to disturb the tragic scene, Evan guessed that the leopard had been stuck for at least 3 days. Perhaps, in a desperate attempt to scratch an itch or mark his territory, he had wedged himself while rubbing against the tree. Then, in a panic, he must have struggled violently, the unforgiving wood tearing deep into his flesh, until he had finally collapsed from exhaustion, pain, and dehydration. His solitary life meant no pride or mate would come looking for him. He had been left to struggle helplessly in a state of desperate, silent pain. Evan and Mila exchanged a tense, meaningful look. No words were needed. They both understood that this was a life-or-death situation that demanded quick, decisive, and potentially dangerous action. Mila slipped out of the truck, her movements silent and fluid. She performed a preliminary check from a safe but close distance, her trained eyes assessing the wound. She could see the angry, swollen tissues around the branch and the way blood and infected fluid seeped continuously from the gash. She returned to the truck and shook her head, her expression grim. Evan, observing the deep scuff marks in the dirt around the tree's base, confirmed the leopard had likely wedged itself and then fought for its life, tearing the wound wider before finally collapsing. Both knew with a grim certainty that, without immediate treatment, the combination of necrosis, infection, and severe dehydration would be fatal. The situation was dire. The Central Ranger Station was a grueling 2-day journey away, and in this remote sector of the reserve, their radio had no signal. They couldn't call for help. They would have to rely on themselves, on their training, their courage, and the limited equipment they carried. Mila gripped the first aid kit, a profound sense of weight settling on her shoulders. She realized that her advanced medical training, honed in classrooms and sterile labs, was about to be put to the ultimate test, and that her skill might be the only thing that could decide this creature's life. Evan glanced at the handsaw secured in the back of the truck. It was a simple, low-tech tool, but it was perhaps their only chance to free the animal from its wooden prison. They looked at each other and nodded, a silent commitment to a mission where every single decision would be critical. First, they had to ensure safety for both themselves and the leopard. Even in its weakened state, a panicked predator could be lethal. Mila readied the tranquilizer rifle, her movements efficient and sure. She aimed carefully for the leopard's dense hindquarter muscle and fired. The dart hit its mark with a soft puff. The leopard startled, a weak, involuntary spasm running through its body, and then it went completely limp. Its head, which had been held up by the branch, drooped as its breathing eased into the deep rhythm of unconsciousness. With the scene now safe, Evan drew the handsaw. He began the arduous task of cutting through the thick, iron-hard acacia branch that was clamped around the leopard's neck. The harsh, grating strokes of the saw echoed in the vast morning quiet. It was slow, difficult work. Sweat beaded on his brow and ran into his eyes, but his movements remained steady and powerful. Mila watched him closely, her hand resting on the medical kit, her eyes darting between Evan and the leopard, ready to intervene if anything changed in the animal's condition. At last, with a loud crack, the branch broke, freeing the leopard from its trap. Together, they gently laid the animal on a canvas stretcher they had spread on the ground. Its body was limp and shockingly light for such a large predator, and it smelled of decay. Mila immediately went to work. With a bottle of sterile saline and antiseptic, she began to irrigate and clean the horrific wound. The injury was even worse up close. The neck tissues were deeply torn, with a foul-smelling mixture of yellow fluid and pus filling the compressed area. She worked with a focused intensity, cleaning the wound as best she could to prevent further infection before dressing it with sterile pads and bandages. As a final, crucial step, she administered an emergency broad-spectrum antibiotic injection. Working quickly and in perfect sync, they loaded the Leopard onto the stretcher and, with a coordinated effort, lifted it into the back of their specialized vehicle. They carefully secured its body with soft rope so it wouldn't slip and slide on the rough track ahead of them. Before closing the doors, they placed a small insulated crate with a few pieces of dried meat inside, hoping that if and when the Leopard woke, it could find the strength to eat. With everything ready, they set off on the grueling 2-day journey back to the station. The car rolled away from the bright yellow grass and the small gnarled tree that had almost become the Leopard's tomb. Inside the crate in the back, the animal remained unconscious, its body occasionally twitching from the memory of days of unimaginable pain. The journey was a long and arduous ordeal. Mila constantly checked on their patient, moistening its dry, cracked lips with a few drops of water from a syringe to keep it alive. Evan, meanwhile, focused on the difficult task of navigating the rutted, unforgiving red dirt road, his expert driving dodging the worst of the ruts and potholes that threatened to jostle their precious cargo. For 2 long days and 1 tense night, they took turns keeping watch, counting each of the Leopard's shallow, precious breaths. At night, they pitched a small tent by the roadside with the crate placed close by, allowing for constant care and monitoring. In the flickering, dancing light of their small campfire, both rangers were silent, their minds fixed on the singular hope of arriving at the station in time. By the next morning, a small miracle occurred. The Leopard stirred briefly. When Mila offered him water, he weakly lapped at it. A short while later, he even managed to chew a few small pieces of the dried meat. It was a rare and precious sign of revival, a flicker of his indomitable will to live that brought a wave of relief to the exhausted rangers and renewed their determination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the familiar, comforting sight of the station's roofline appeared on the horizon, the place where real, intensive healing could finally begin. The station's veterinarians were ready and waiting to receive the case. The Leopard was taken straight to the field operating room and placed under deep anesthesia. The head veterinarian carefully debrided the necrotic, dead tissue from the wound, drained the pockets of yellow fluid, and controlled the bleeding from the deeply compressed areas. The surgery was long and complex. Stitch by meticulous stitch, the wide, gaping wounds on the Leopard's neck and face were closed. The Leopard then received intravenous fluids to combat its severe dehydration and high-dose antibiotics to fight the raging infection. Afterward, it was moved to the intensive care unit for resuscitation and round-the-clock observation. The next day, the Leopard opened its eyes. He licked his dry lips and, when offered a small piece of fresh meat, he accepted it, his first real meal after days of exhaustion and starvation. The 2 rangers, Evan and Mila, stood just outside the enclosure, their faces tired but their eyes alight with a quiet, profound joy. He ate slowly, deliberately, but the spark of survival, the fierce, unquenchable will to live, had returned to his eyes. 2 days later, he was able to stand and take a few tentative, wobbly steps within the limited space of his recovery cage. The veterinarians were pleased. His recovery was progressing better than they had dared to hope. Evan and Mila visited him daily, sometimes spending hours simply sitting nearby, their calm, familiar presence a part of his healing, as they watched life slowly but surely return to the magnificent animal. The whole station felt the lift of a memorable and hard-won rescue. A week later, the Leopard was strong enough to be moved to a large, semi-wild enclosure, allowing him to continue his conditioning. He began to roam more, his powerful muscles regaining their flexibility after so much pain and disuse. The terrible wound on his neck healed with incredible speed, and a new layer of soft golden fur slowly began to cover the terrible scars. A remarkable bond had formed between the Leopard and his rescuers. Each time Evan and Mila came by, the leopard would approach the fence and rumble a soft, guttural greeting, a sound known as chuffing, a rare and intimate expression of trust. On the 10th day, after a final checkup, the veterinary team made the decision everyone had been hoping for. He was ready to go home. They decided to take him back to the grassland where he had been trapped, to his own territory. The vehicle rolled out in an atmosphere of quiet excitement. The leopard, calm and alert in his crate, had eyes that were brighter and clearer than ever before. When they arrived at the site, the gnarled acacia tree stood as a silent witness to the ordeal. When the door of the crate opened, the leopard stepped out slowly, his paws steady and sure on the familiar yellow grass. He drew a deep breath of the free, wild air, lifted his head to the wide blue sky, and seemed, in that single, powerful gesture, to announce his return to the world. Then he turned and held the rangers in his intense golden gaze. There were no words, no sounds, but the look was clear, an unspoken gratitude carried in the profound silence between man and beast. Evan and Mila said nothing, their hearts full, the sacred moment etching itself into their memories forever as proof of what unwavering resolve and compassion can achieve. Then, with a flick of his tail, the leopard walked away, his movements fluid and confident. He blended into the vast grassland with the effortless grace of his kind, a ghost of spots and shadows, until his sleek, muscular form disappeared on the horizon. They knew that from now on he would continue his wild, solitary life, strong and free, no longer chained by the memory of pain. On the long drive back to the station, they replayed the difficult emotional journey in their minds. They understood again, with a renewed clarity, that a ranger's mission is not only to protect nature from the outside world, but sometimes to protect it from itself, to give life a chance when all hope seems lost. It was a day neither of them would ever forget, the day they saved the life of a silent master of the shadows, a true ghost of the prairie.